today's episode of Conversations. I'm Lisa, and I'm joined by my husband, John, and I'm also joined by Christian and Juliana.
Yeah.
Super excited about that.
So excited about having our beautiful daughter-in-laws next to us.
Yeah. So
Juliana, 12 years, married to Addison, right?
Yeah.
12.
And Christian is almost 1.5 years with Arden, our youngest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We are moving forward. So we hope you enjoyed that last episode. This is going to be part 2 of love and relationships. And just a reminder, if you are listening, that means you're not seeing it, that we've actually are filming the podcast. You can watch that on the YouTube pages of John Bevere or Lisa Bevere. And Conversations, this is exciting, is actually now part of a Messenger podcast network, which includes the Messenger podcast and Let's Talk About It with Sons and Daughters. And we're going to be adding new shows, so you just need to watch it, check it out. We've got this whole umbrella thing. But today, we're going to be talking about part 2 of love and relationships. And John, why are we talking about this?
It's so important, Lisa, because today I believe the young generation is being so attacked in their marriages and commitment. And I think a lot of them are saying we have questions that are unanswered. We have concerns. We have challenges that we feel are overwhelming. And we just want to bring a lot of comfort in those situations. You know, Paul makes this statement in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. He said, I went through trials that I almost despaired life. And he said, but we were comforted by God, who now we have the ability to comfort others with the same comfort we receive. So I feel like that's what we're doing with this series. And that's why I love doing 2 parts and would have loved doing 10 parts because marriage is so important.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, we've got our 2 daughter-in-laws and we want to just dive into some more things that we really need to discuss. And I just want to open up with, how did you guys know you were supposed to marry Arden? How did you know you were supposed to marry Addison? Well, was it a feeling? Was it you just liked him better than the other guys you dated? I mean, I'd love to hear from you.
Sure.
Julie, almost 12 years.
Yeah,
Just saying,
almost 12 years. So I was 19, actually 18, when I knew Addison was the only one for me. And it happened really quickly, as you guys know. And I think looking back on it, all I can say is that I knew there was just no other option. Like, he was the most incredible person I'd ever interacted with. And
What was different about him?
Well, something that was definitely different was how attractive he was. And also just how genuine and real his commitment and relationship with God was. So you guys know this, but the week I met Addison was also the week I really met the Lord for the first time, and the Holy Spirit, and all of it was so wrapped up in one that then God, in his grace, it didn't feel that way at the time, had us go through a season of separation. So that was 9 months where we already knew this was my spouse, but we weren't allowed to be together. We weren't allowed to be interacting in any way, shape, or form.
Because of the intern program you were in.
That was not John and I,
no.
just for the record.
No, because of the rules. And I look back now, though, and I see that the way we went into this whirlwind romance, God wanted to solidify, you don't have to go through Addison to get to me. But
That's beautiful.
What could have harmed us was this idea that I had to go through Addison to get to God is now such a huge tool and for good in our lives, because we both lead each other to God. But it's because we're on our own. So I don't know, all that to say, it was like getting an email that the prince wanted to give you a check for millions of dollars, but
You've gotten that one? I've gotten that one.
But it actually came through. Like meeting
That's awesome.
Addison and coming together with Addison was like winning the lottery. So there really wasn't a question for me.
You know, it's amazing how similar our stories are, because I led Lisa to the Lord on our first date.
Yeah.
And
It's a family MO, I'm starting to think.
I just remember when I came home after just 3 weeks, I've graduated from college, and I just had this look on my face, and my mom went, "What's up with you?" I said, "Mom, she's different than anyone." I almost, and I hope I don't get in trouble, I really believe that God creates a soulmate for us. I do. And I know that can be challenged, but if my steps are ordered of the Lord, and that, I have to say, is what did it for me.
Yeah.
I just knew, like I knew I was saved. This woman is my wife.
Yeah.
And even when friends were saying, because, you know, Lisa was straight out of the world. They were like, Oh, no. There's girls that have been raised in the church. You know, you got a call in your life, and it wouldn't mean anything.
It was a dark.
It was
a dark
well,
past.
yeah, but I knew. I looked at my parents and I said, I know she's the one, and they said, we support you.
Well, and what's so cool about that is that people will ask me, so you came straight out of the world, and how did John and Lisa react to Addison wanting to marry
We had
you
seen it
so quickly? And I love that it wasn't even a thing, because one, you trusted your son,
Right.
and two, it was so close, where I immediately felt this just this overwhelming love, where it was like, when you know, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I still remember that Addison was supposed to pick me up from the airport. I had just come from the Ukraine. So I have been flying all night from the Ukraine, and he was talking to Juli on the phone and got lost going to the Denver airport, a place he'd probably driven 50 times to, and just got lost in love. He was totally in love. And when I left, he hadn't even met you. And then he was madly in love. And when he picked me up, he just said, Mom, I know. I know. And as soon as he said, I know, I knew. And then he said, and you're going to lunch right now. I'm like, I have not taken a shower in like 70 hours. He's like, well, we're going to lunch. So,
Well, how about you, Christian? I'd love to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, I think that theme of when you know is consistent through all of our stories, which I kind of hate saying because it is a cliche. And when you don't know, it's hard to know when you will know, because in my dating experience, I always tried to date for love, what I thought love was at the time. But I dated some people that weren't high caliber, and I dated some that were. So in my mind, it was kind of that same instance of, how do I know this one is the one? How do I say I deserve better than this if there is someone else out there? Because yeah, quite honestly, the guy I dated before Arden was an amazing guy. Any single ladies, I would send his way. But I didn't have that peace, and I wasn't sure why. And I just remember praying, and I was like, God, if there is someone else out there, I don't think I deserve better, but I'm going to trust in that you have someone very specific. And like you said, John, kind of a soulmate that is going to bring out the best in me and I the best in him. And I kind of went to bed that night and had a dream, and this is like the super spiritual Enneagram 4 side of the story, but I had a dream, and in the dream I was engaged to someone, and it was someone I had never seen, but I was like, wow, I would marry that guy. He's good looking. And there was just certain things within the dream, and I just woke up, I remember thinking, God, I'm going to trust you, that there is a peace that surpasses a checklist, that surpasses feelings, that there's a validity to when you set it up, that it is perfect in the sense. And I remember when I met Arden, I was thinking, he could be the one, he can be the one. And there was a phrase that he said in that dream that Arden said in real life, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, this is it. Don't blow it. Met the parents on the first date, and I was like, please don't blow it. Sure, an accident. I think it was a setup, but we're here.
I had a very similar thing as well. I was just in between sleep and waking up, and I saw the clearest vision of the profile of a brunette woman with hair down to here, her shoulder length. And first of all, I knew it was my wife. I'd never met Lisa yet.
Stop going for the blondes after that.
And that's what I was going to say. My mom had me pegged for a blonde because all the girls I was attracted to were blonde. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I remember leading Lisa to the Lord. Her hair was long. She went back to school. She came back, and I was ready to propose to her, and her hair was shoulder length. She had cut her hair. And I said, would you just do a profile for me? And I went, oh my gosh, that's the girl I saw. So I am.
If you want to get married, cut your hair.
Cut your hair.
Dreams.
I want to say something.
Yeah, I got to get us back on track here, babe.
No, here is my concern. I do think there's people that have that, what you guys are talking about. But I also think people can become our soulmates, because God knits us together in a covenant. And I've talked to a lot of people where they got married and the people had all the right elements, but they hadn't grown into that oneness. And I almost would feel like maybe that was a more mature thing. I'm not saying, like sometimes
Our stories.
you guys know. No, what I'm saying is there's people that are married that might be sitting here now going, I never had that experience.
Once you make that
And
covenant, it's an eternal covenant. You made it with
exactly.
God. So there's no question.
God knits our souls together.
And I guess right now we're reaching out to the single people, but we are spiritual beings. And we can't downplay that. Just like I know that we were supposed to move to Colorado Springs. I know that I'm saved. I know there are just things and don't discount that, and don't jump early when you don't know that. And I'm sure that you were wrestling with, this is a great guy, and there's no doubt he was probably a phenomenal guy.
How long did you guys date?
So we dated for right around 2 years, and Arden and I dated for like 2.5 months before we got engaged. So a big contrast.
I will say that I know that both Arden and Addison were ready to get married. They were not playing. They were not players. They wanted to get married. Okay, so moving
Direct us.
from
Keep us on
the
task, baby.
soulmates, moving from the soulmate.
Yes.
Let's talk about this, because I do think that maybe people have been conditioned to accept toxic relationship or abusive relationships, and let's talk about whether there's what does a healthy dynamic look like, so that we've got codependent where people are enabling each other versus independent where people are like, I live my life, you live your life, and then we've got people that are interdependent. So Julie, you mentioned that early on you guys might have had more of a codependent, and you also talked about now you're kind of both leading each other towards the things of Christ. Can you talk about that transition?
Yeah, so being so young and 19 when we got married, 19 when we got pregnant, there was this sense of like, I went from my parents' house to Addison. And so in a lot of ways, he fathered me, and while simultaneously fathering our child. And that worked because of who he is. Yeah. He rose to the challenge and did it miraculously. But then as our relationship progressed a few years in, there was some unhealthy stuff that started to develop because of that narrative that we had taken on, and where I didn't feel like his equal. I felt like he was fathering me still, which really messed with my identity as a mom and a wife.
Like, I'm not your child.
Yeah, I'm not your child. And it's also our personality dynamic, where he just more naturally is like, well, I'll just tell you what to do because I know the best way to do it. And he usually does. But that's not a healthy relationship. Yeah. Thanks a lot, John.
I'm so sorry.
But that's not health. So the way we were able to progress from that parent-child relationship to being interdependent was that we both were on our own journeys of growth and our own journeys of health. And Addison no longer saw my progress as his progress. I mean, it was in a sense, but it wasn't as intermingled where it was like he was in charge of me. It was he was alongside me.
I grew you. He was saying, I'm celebrating your growth.
Yeah. And he will joke now and he'll say, I raised you the first 10 years. Now you're going to raise me the next 70. I'm like, let's just, be alongside each other.
That's so cute. I love that. And Christian, I'm gonna tell you something Arden said to me. I was like, Arden, when he knew it was time for him to get married, he had this knowing. Arden's very prophetic. And he was dating some absolutely gorgeous girls, right? So I said, okay, Arden, why Christian? And so the first thing he said to me is, she asked me the hard questions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what drew him to you, is he wanted somebody that wasn't going to be dependent on him. Mm-hmm. He wanted somebody who had a very strong relationship with God, independent of him, so they could be interdependent. And you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, I wasn't always like that. And
none of us were.
Just anyone listening to that, because it took me asking myself the hard questions before I could ask him, and just getting real and uncomfortable because, like I said, I wanted to be married for a long time. I thought I was ready for marriage for a long time, but in this little season before I met Arden, I really had to get real and raw of, God, what does a partnership look like in your minds for me? Like, you know how you knit me. What do I need? And I think from that gleamed the questions I wanted to ask Arden. And I did. And, we got married. So
I think
ask
we've answered the question, and not to be codependent is to have a very strong relationship with God on your own, and then you build your partner. Let's talk about toxic marriage. I'd really like to address that because there's a lot of people that are in toxic situations. Lisa, I'd love for you to address that.
Okay. Well, I think that sometimes people can get in patterns where they think toxicity and abuse is normal. And when they actually have an eye-opening experience that this isn't healthy, like when being in a marriage where one person feels less than the other is never going to be healthy. And that doesn't mean that might be like less skilled in something. I'm saying less than, devalued, dismissed,
just
or
put down.
Absolutely. And that, a lot of times people think that's automatically only things that happen to women, but it happens to men too.
For sure.
I know that for me and you in our marriage at the beginning, I found it very frightening to relinquish control to you, because I thought if I turn over this control, nothing is going to get done. And I thought, I don't know if I trust John. And God said to me, you don't have to trust John. You have to trust me. And so, we have to understand that sometimes when people are afraid, they'll try to control things. When people haven't had something modeled well, then they can't do better. We came from very different marital backgrounds. John came from a family who never fought. I came from a family who didn't ever not fight. They fought all the time. And so it was that was toxic, and yours was not modeled. It wasn't bad. It was just kind of like, what are we building? So we wanted to build something different. So again, I think that there's people in very abusive, toxic relationships. That doesn't mean they're hopeless. That doesn't mean that you can't bring it to a crisis and say, I love you and I'm committed to our marriage, but I will not go forward with our marriage looking like
That's
this.
what I was looking for.
Yes. So
how does somebody handle that situation? You don't allow abuse to continue.
yeah.
You
And
bring
you've got to
it
bring somebody healthy into a situation. When
Right.
when you get in an abusive situation, it's not just the abuser that gets unhealthy. It's the abused person gets, they get their little spirits broken and their identity torn up. And so you need someone healthy on the outside to come in, which we are big proponents of counselors. One of the greatest things that we have been able to offer, and I know tons of people have been involved with it, is the course that we did with Chip Judd. We brought to people the people that we would go to when we were like, hey, we need some tools to move forward with stuff. One thing I want to do, because we're almost out of time, I would like both of you to say something to a young girl, or maybe someone who feels like maybe love and life has passed her by, and she's thinking of just settling, or she's just thinking, what is one thing that you wish you would have known that you could say to them to protect them from having their feelings hurt and just getting an unhealthy relationship? Because I love what you said, because that was my prayer. I said, God, I think I know what I like, but I'm not sure what I like is healthy. So God, I want you to tell me what's best for me. I'm not going to pick because I'm weird. I'm going to let you pick for me, because you know what my strengths are and my weaknesses are. So I love that. That was kind of your prayer.
Yeah. I think just even what we're talking on, what comes to my spirit is, so my father and I's relationship has grown tremendously in the last 24 years, but mostly in the last 4 years. And honestly, marriage has helped that in a lot of ways. But I think before, I was seeking so much of my identity in who I ended up with, and how loved I was, or how lovable I was able to be, was based on if someone loved me. And I think sometimes that hurries the season of looking for that and awakening things before it's ready, just because you want a void filled. And so in part of that, I would say, glean from who you are solely in Christ, solely that you are lovable, solely that there is nothing that you are searching for, because marriage adds to your life. It doesn't solve what's wrong with you, because that's not what it's for. It's not codependent. And the other side of that, I would say, just, if you have awoken things. And if there has been a negative pattern, like you're saying, you don't have to continue that, that there is restoration. I mean, I thought from small and big instances, God, why would you pick me to be Arden's wife? Like, there was probably one of those gorgeous girls he could have ended up with, but it wasn't necessarily what I had done or hadn't done. It was because of who he had made me to be and how he saw Arden and I being married.
Can I before you speak, Julie, I want to say something and I'm going to give you guys freedom to really disagree with me.
Wow.
But I believe we as Christians are supposed to be missional. I believe that makes us stand out. My meat, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and finish his work. I find that as a single person, the single people that I see are healthy, are missional. They're so focused on their mission that God has called them to. And it just seems like there's an intersection.
Yeah, they're not in a waiting pattern.
Yep, they're not in a waiting pattern. And there's an intersection that occurs, and they go, this is it. Mm-hmm. And I would say, if I was counseling my young self again, I would say, be much more intentional on the mission that God has called me to in this world, and let the other come into place. He knows I need it. He knows when I need it. I'm going to let it come into place. I welcome your challenge, but that's something I want to say to every single person out there.
No, I completely agree. I think this idea that is really strong in Christian communities, that your life doesn't start until you're married, that your calling's not going to be given to you until you're married, that you're disqualified because you're not married, are such lies. And really, I think one of the main reasons why there is so much divorce within Christianity is that people just want to get on with it. It gets really confusing when you feel like God's just waiting for you to get married, to use you. And so I think that's excellent advice, that people need to be going on the path that God has for them, and you'll see those people alongside you. Like, I just think what I would say to someone who is in that situation is trust God. Like, believe that he really has woven your life together so specifically for someone who is going to be like, just know you and be for you, and that partner who really is going to propel you forward, who's not going to drag you down, and you trust that, and you move in that belief, you move in that faith, and don't let comparison, even what we've talked about here today, don't look at our stories and allow the enemy to use them to tell you you're not good enough, because that's just a lie.
And their spouse that you're with isn't because you have a soulmate. Right?
No, absolutely not. Like, if you are moving towards God, you will be changed. We are all being changed by the grace of God. So you can be changed into that perfect person for your spouse.
So let me put it in a nutshell, and then maybe we can close. If you're single, be missional and focus on what God has called you to do. Trust him. He will put you in places that your trust will be challenged. But that's part of our walk with God. If you're married, it doesn't matter if you felt like your spouse is your soulmate or not your soulmate. That no longer is even a question to be asked. Yeah. You have made an eternal covenant with God that I will stay faithful to this person, and you will trust that God will cause all things to work out for your and your spouse's good.
I love that. Well, I feel like you did a great synopsis on that. So, hey, thanks for tuning in. We would love to have you subscribe. We want to hear from you. We want to have your questions put out here. I wish you could see our list here. We had this massive list and we covered like 3 things. But so anyway, we want to hear from you. And if we haven't covered something, we totally would love to cover it. Also, you can buy the Saints book. All you have to do, her husband, all you have to do is go to themessengerpodcast.com/offer. And the great thing is, if you do it soon, you're going to get some free goodies as well. But even if you didn't get the goodies, you should totally get it because it is a good book. So until then, and until next time, this has been Conversations with John, Lisa, Julie, and Christian Bevere.
Thanks for listening to Conversations with John and Lisa. Let us know your thoughts by leaving a review. And be sure to subscribe and share these episodes through iTunes. You can also connect with John and Lisa through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Until next time.